seconds. 15 seconds. 10 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
In your face, all over the place. We're online 24/7. 24/7. You're listening to the hottest internet station.
From beautiful Saline in southeastern Michigan.
Around the world at sunsky.mysteries.com.
This is the 2009 Top 10 Webcam in the World winner. This is SETV.
Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our weekly Tuesday night interview show. What we like to call here and Surrounded by Idiots, Inquisition Night. We have a special guest with us tonight. He is our very first real live Hollywood actor. Now, first of all, I want to touch on a little bit of business that came up today during the day. I'm sure that most of you that have watched the news and keep an eye on this sort of thing have heard the news that over there in the North Sea, off of the coast of England and I believe Ireland, there is a oil well. It's actually a natural gas well that has a major issue. There is methane coming up off of the floor of the sea, and it is bubbling merrily out there, and there is a huge methane cloud surrounding this rig. And some of the other rigs have been abandoned, and they're literally not letting anybody out there because the atmospheric levels of methane are actually lethal right now, and they got no idea how to stop it. And in relation to that, the gas prices here in Michigan jumped 20 cents today. It went from $3.91 to almost $4.17 during the day today. Fortunately, this morning I saw the issues there on the news, and I took my gas cans, gassed up the truck, and filled all my gas cans with gasoline. So, if the gas prices haven't risen in your area yet, they may shortly. Tonight's guest is a science fiction writer as well as a genuine Hollywood actor. His name is Cory Williams, and we're going to bring him in right now. Cory, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I am excellent. Oh, and you sound so good on the new phone system. We have a new phone system, for folks. We are actually using a real-life landline now instead of the voice over IP. So the calls aren't going to drop. We're actually going to have a guest for the entire show. Isn't that something? So, Cory, you're a actor out there in Hollywood. You're also a science fiction writer.
Yes.
And we have your biography up on the screen for the video side viewers. And for the audio side, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I was born and raised in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Majored in creative writing in high school. I went to a special magnet school, the Philadelphia High School for Creative and Performing Arts. Graduated there in '81, went on to Stanford University where I majored in drama and minored in dance, got my bachelor's in '86, and then have been basically pursuing the dream ever since, eventually moving out to Los Angeles in '99 because I had gotten to a point in my career back east where not enough was happening, and if I was actually going to get involved in film production in one way or another, I was going to have to come out west. So here I am, and that's more or less what I've been doing since.
And how do you like living on the West Coast? It's had to have been a big change from the East Coast.
It is. It was a huge change. First of all, I was used to watching the seasons change. Well, that was one of the biggest things, was adjusting to the fact that the seasons don't change nearly as dramatically out here as they do back in Philly, where you're actually used to seeing the leaves turn brown and orange and what have you in the fall, and then fall off the trees, and then seeing ice and snow during the wintertime, which is, I mean, a good thing out here. You don't have to shovel sunshine, so that's always a good thing. But yeah, getting used to the not seeing the seasons change, getting used to there actually being a season out here for brush fires, that was odd. And
is that fall or summer or winter?
Usually, when the Santa Ana winds kick up, which is usually around the summer in the summer toward the fall, it's really a strange thing that they actually have a season set aside for brush fires. But one of the things that I loved when I came out here immediately was just the internationality of it, if I can actually coin that word, because I live in a neighborhood that is largely Mexican and Asian, and Koreatown is just a hop, skip, and a jump away from me. There's Thai Town, which is actually in Hollywood proper.
Uh-huh.
Ethiopia is not far from there. I mean, you have such a wide range of ethnic groups in such close proximity to one another, basically, I mean, all contained within the city. And to be able to go from one spot to another and take in all of that has really been a great thing.
And does everybody get along?
By and large, I mean, people are going to be people, so unfortunately people are going to find reasons not to get along. But most of my experiences have been positive.
Well,
Let's just put it that way. Most of my experiences have been positive. You hear a lot of negative stuff on the news, and that, I mean, but you hear negative stuff on the news no matter what big city you live in, and it's saddening. But by and large, my experiences personally have been positive.
Yeah, you ought to try coming to Detroit once in a while. Ooh, not too many positive things happening around here right now.
I was there once. I was there it was years ago, actually. Mm-hmm. Back when I was living in Philly, I was touring with a show called We Have Stories to Tell of Africa, and we were doing this whirlwind tour, and we actually had a 10-day stop in Detroit. So we got to play at a few venues. We played in Detroit and Saginaw.
Oh, okay, Saginaw. Yeah, I'm well familiar with Saginaw, as well as Detroit too. My wife's from Detroit, so it's right now Detroit's in the middle of attempting to keep from being bankrupt.
Oi.
Yeah, oi. There's you wouldn't believe the mess that's going on here. The state is getting ready to send in an emergency manager.
Oh, wow.
Dave Bing, the mayor, has it's just so strange. They're out of money. They have no money. And the mayor and the governor says, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do this, this, and this. And the mayor is resisting it, saying, well, you can't do that. And the governor's saying, well, you guys are bankrupt, and you're asking for our help. So this is the contract. And, of course, right after that, Mayor Bing had a perforated intestine, and now he's in the hospital.
Oh, wow.
And they're having riots all over Detroit, apparently, all of these demonstrations where they think the state's coming in to take over the city and everything else. And it's just, Cory, it's just a mess out here.
Well, if the city is imploding, then the state the city needs the state to come in and do something.
Yeah, well, the politics in Detroit have been just bizarre for years and years and years. The good old boy mentality, if I can use that term, is just so entrenched in Detroit. It's unbelievable. They have the school system there in Detroit, and we're kind of getting off track from the acting stuff, but the school system in Detroit's been in trouble for years and years and years, over a decade, and they keep sending in emergency manager after emergency manager, and the school board just makes their life so difficult they throw up their hands and quit. And I think they're on their like 7th or 8th emergency manager for the school system now.
Ow.
Yeah, it's the most bizarre thing, and being so close to it, it's just very strange. But then again, we're only about 10 miles away from Ann Arbor, which is a huge multi-ethnic college campus at the University of Michigan. Mm-hmm. So it's sort of like where you live out there in Southern California, but more of a microcosm of the nationalities going to the school and everything.
It's like, you know, if there's no shame in asking for help if you really need it, and by the sounds of things, they really need it.
Oh man, do they ever, Cory? There's whole blocks in Detroit that are completely abandoned now. There's like only one house is occupied per city block.
Ow.
And they're paying people to move out of that house to try to congregate the people in one or two blocks. You know, they're trying to get 10 or 12 families to move onto one street so that there's more neighborhoods, and they're planning on tearing down all the other houses and turning it into parkland. It's the craziest thing you've ever seen. They're closing the police stations because they don't have the money for the cops, and they're putting the cops on the street. So when somebody has a problem in their neighborhood and needs to go to the police station, there's a telephone there.
Oh, jeez.
It's just going from bad to worse, and you know, everybody tries to keep their head up about it and everything. And I mean,
well, California is. I mean, there's a whole big thing about California going broke. I still find it hard to wrap my head around an entire state going broke, but we're not nearly that bad off.
So the news reports have been overblown, is what you're saying.
Well, I'm just going from my own observation, which, granted, is limited because I'm not involved in politics, but it just doesn't. First of all, it doesn't make sense to me how an entire state can go broke. I don't understand how that can even happen. So, and also, I mean, when you consider that California, especially Southern California, is the home of one of this nation's largest exports, which is the entertainment business.
Yeah, as well as food.
Yeah.
I mean, you guys have the fruit farms and everything. Right now, all of the California and Mexican crops are coming in here in our stores locally.
So, it's been a little difficult for me to wrap my head around how all of that and how the arcanities of how all of that works, but
that is,
here I am.
Yeah, but, you know, it is, as they say, it is what it is, and, well, all we can do is vote in the elections and hope to heck the next guy can do a better job. Back to the subject of the show.
Exactly.
You know, folks, that actually gives me a good segue, because, believe it or not, I, Bill Zam, do like to relax once in a while. I like to shut my brain off. And I know that's hard for our audience to grasp. It's like opening up your front door and finding a flying saucer sitting in your front yard, a real live one, not one of them cardboard jobs. But I do need to relax. Sometimes I just need to disconnect from the doom and gloom that I'm reporting all the time and sit down and read a book. And I like all different kinds of authors, all different kinds of books. And Cory sent us an email and said, hey, you know what, I'm a science fiction author, and I'd kind of like to come on the show. And I said, well, he's a Hollywood actor, so, I mean, that's a bonus right there. And we got a hold of some of his books, and I read one of his books. It is called, let's find it right here, The Taking of Cinderel's Hope. There it is, right there on the screen for those of you on the video side. And this book I started reading around 4 o'clock Sunday afternoon. I was done at 9. It was a very good read, very quick read, very, not a lot of really deep plot twists where you got to kind of sit back and go, well, how the heck are they, what's that all about? Because some writers, they just start writing, it's bizarre how some books are written. But Cory's books are straight and to the point, and I like that. Cory, when did you first want to start writing science fiction?
Well, I would say that started very early. Well, okay, going far enough back, and this definitely gives away my age, I cut my eye teeth on Star Trek. And
Me too.
And I'm talking watching it first run.
Oh, yeah.
Watching the original series first run. I was 3 years old, did not know what I was watching at the time, but something in my brain said, this is cool, this is fun, I'm going to stick with it, and so I did. And then stayed with it when it went into syndication, and then just went on, had a steady diet of science fiction and odd sensibility movies. And the first science fiction novel I read was Isaac Asimov's novelization of the movie Fantastic Voyage.
Oh, me too.
And seeing that someone can do that someone can capture that on paper, that gave me the impetus. It's like, you know what, I want to try this. I grew up surrounded by books.
Mm-hmm.
My mother was an English teacher for most of her professional life. And so it just sort of, when science fiction became my genre of choice as far as film, television, and literature, it just seemed to be a perfect fit. And my head was always in the stars anyway. My mom told me, well, as far as the actor and writer, my mother would tell me that the warning signs were very early on, and she used to joke that I had been left on her front doorstep by a flying saucer. So getting involved with science fiction just kind of made perfect sense. As a matter of fact, that statement is part of the dedication of my third novel, Hunter's Moon.
I read that. I haven't read the entire novel, but I read the dedication on the front. That's one of the things that I wanted to ask you about. What types of influences your parents had on you? I mean, was everybody in your family supportive of you doing what you're doing?
Absolutely. Again, like I said, my mom was an English teacher for most of her professional life,
Mm-hmm.
so I had that. My grandmother, and I lived with my mom and my grandmother, and she was a newspaper editor and later a Baptist minister.
Oh, wow.
So I had really some very interesting influences around the house. And again, growing up surrounded by books, watching science fiction on television, going out to movies, and I consider myself very lucky because whenever I went shopping with my mom as a child, I would always gravitate toward bookstores.
Right.
And my mom loved that. So if I didn't really have to do a whole lot of begging when it came to books. It's like, okay, anything that's going to encourage him to keep reading, by all means, I'm going to do this. So I ended up amassing a ridiculous library over the years. And my influences there, I would say, okay, as far as the media goes, one of my first major influences was Gene Roddenberry, because if you look at Star Trek and what he was trying to say, first of all, the show itself was a series of morality plays
Mm-hmm.
in a science fiction format, largely so that he could get his message past the sponsors and past the network's censors.
Yes, I read. It was the what was it? The Making of the Star Trek series. It was the paperback that came out. When was it? Probably in the late 60s.
Late 60s, probably. I think the early 70s after the show had gone into syndication.
Right. Yeah. You know what which book I'm talking about.
Oh, absolutely. I've dog-eared that thing to death.
Yeah, I've lost my copy. It finally wound up without any cover on it or anything. By the time I got done with it, because I read it so many times. In fact, a lot of the time when I'm in front of the camera and I'm doing any type of off-script type of show, I believe it or not, I sort of mimic William Shatner.
Oh God! How many times have I done that?
Oh, haven't we all, folks? We're talking. This is kind of shop talk, and everybody. I think probably pretty much anybody who has been in front of a camera has mimicked William Shatner once, at least once, because he is so. I mean, he's just a consummate, confident actor. I think I would call it. He's so confident in front of the camera. I know always has been.
And to be perfectly honest, I think he got even better. He got even better when he stopped taking himself so seriously.
Yeah. Once he started doing some comedic parts, he
Yep.
he was much better. And I think a lot of it was that Star Trek book that came out when he finally found out how much the other actors disliked his methodology.
Yeah, and he's. I mean, they've actually long since they've gotten together. They've reconciled. I mean, they've the whole cast had reconnected on much better terms, which was a good thing that they were able to do that before DeForest Kelley and James Doohan died.
Yeah, I still miss those two.
Yeah. Oh wow.
It's like almost our family dying when those two passed away.
It hurt when you found out.
Yeah.
But I have to say, with the casting of J.J. Abrams' reboot of Star Trek,
perfect.
They were dead on.
Yeah.
Carl Urban captured DeForest Kelley so incredibly spot on. It was just ridiculous.
Yeah. He even looks like a young doctor.
He's got Dr. McCoy down. He has Dr. McCoy. I mean, Chris Pine is Kirk. He's not Shatner, but he's got Kirk down to a science.
Yeah, it's the confidence of Captain Kirk. I mean, he was just he doesn't believe in losing, and he's confident.
The fact that he was actually a lot smarter than people realize. I mean, he was a lot smarter than people realize. But there was a statement in one of the earlier episodes of the original show where during his academy days he was a stack of encyclopedias with legs,
mm-hmm.
and a reference to that in the J.J. Abrams film was like, then when Pike found him in that bar all beaten up and says, "What is it? Do you like being the only genius level repeat offender in the Midwest?" So I mean, there had to be something there.
Yeah, it was. I always found the Star Trek series was so good because it was essentially a Western set in space with a morality, like The Rifleman or Bonanza.
Well, when Roddenberry originally pitched the show, he pitched it as Wagon Train to the Stars.
Yeah. And
but when he gave them the pilot episode, The Cage, which up until relatively recently had never been aired, when he gave them The Cage, the network passed on it because they thought the show was too cerebral for their viewing audience. But they did something that was unprecedented at that time and gave him the chance to shoot another pilot, which was The Man Trap.
Right.
And that eventually sold the show. And then they took The Cage and recut it into their only two-part episode, The Menagerie.
Yeah, in fact, the special. A lot of people don't know this if they aren't really into Star Trek. If they're not Trekkies, like apparently you and I are, that the types of special effects that they had in that show had never been done, really on a weekly basis, up until that time. In fact, when they were getting ready to do the first shows, the special effects house hadn't gotten any of the scenes of the Enterprise done, and Roddenberry and I think Coons had to go out to the special effects shop and shoot it all themselves.
Yeah. Again, it's like nothing like that for television had ever been done before. And they ran into a problem when they were doing The Cage because with Susan Oliver as in one section as Vina when they made her that Green Orion slave girl.
Mm-hmm.
And they were sending the printouts to a lab, and the film kept coming back with her being pink because the folks at the lab didn't realize she was supposed to be green and kept correcting the color until Roddenberry finally went over there. No, she is supposed to be green. Leave it alone.
I remember reading about that. So Roddenberry influenced your writing.
In as much as definitely, I mean, creating a huge canvas. I mean, he created virtually an entire fictional universe to run free in, and he also created a future. He created and depicted a future in which racial and ethnic differences don't divide us, don't divide us as human beings, and it also made us part of a much larger galactic community. And that idea always appealed to me. I mean, the very fact that you didn't see a whole lot of people of color on the show, but the fact that Nichelle Nichols and George Takei were in positions of relative authority. I mean, they were lieutenants. They were fairly high-ranking within the hierarchy of the ship.
Right.
And they were crucial to the operation of the ship. And I mean, to have them in the forefront the entire time. And one story that Nichelle Nichols had told about her experience, she was actually prepared to leave the show after the first season over a salary dispute, until she went to some kind of affair.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was an NAACP affair, and someone came to her and said, "There's someone I'd like you to meet." And that person happened to be Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
Oh wow, I haven't heard that one before.
And he was a big fan of the show.
Wow.
And she told him that she was prepared to leave the show and go back to doing theater and music, which was her first love. She was originally a singer and a dancer, actually with Duke Ellington. And he told her, "You cannot leave the show." Mainly because how popular the show is, and the fact that your face is on televisions all over the country. And do you not realize the kind of image that you are presenting to women, to black women, to black people all over this country? You have become a symbol, and you cannot leave the show. And she's been part of the Star Trek legacy ever since.
Yeah, and a big part of it.
So finding out things like that made me even more proud to be a fan. But it was just the canvas that Roddenberry had created that really appealed to me and made me want to do things like that. And then later came people like George Lucas, who in creating his Star Wars saga presented a very broad canvas that depicted a huge variety of totally non-human species, which then it owes itself to the biological diversity of the galaxy and the universe that he had created. So taking that made me want to do that type of thing too.
Yeah, I can see that. I wanted to talk about, well, it's the book of yours that I read, The Taking of Sindril's Hope. Is that how you pronounce it, Sindril?
Sindril. Yeah.
Okay.
Sindril's Hope.
That book, I mean, it was the first book that I read, but it seems to me like you've created a pretty darn decent universe yourself.
Oh, thank you.
Out there. I mean, do you have an actual timeline for this universe? Have you done any development of it? And describe the synopsis of the book, because I don't think I could do it credit, but I did really like the characters. I mean, the Galen is I guess you could call him the main character.
He's our primary hero, and he actually appears in Totentanz as well. With the taking of Sindriel's Hope, which actually takes place 10 years prior to Totentanz, there is a passenger liner, a commercial ship, en route to a number of different ports of call, and while it's en route, it gets hijacked by members of a terrorist organization, and they're essentially acting as pirates. Now, they make their demands to have some of their compadres released, and the clock starts ticking. They will kill one passenger every hour until their compadres are released, and it just keeps on going until after a set amount of time, we're just going to abandon ship, blow it up, and take everybody out. So Galen, who is a young man on his way to start university, first time away from home, and he happens to be a member of a race of people that have rather extraordinary psychic abilities. After seeing a number of people die in front of him at the hands of these pirates, decides he does the whole Peter Finch thing, I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore.
Right.
And he decides to start fighting back. So with the help of some of the other crew members that he helps to liberate, he basically keeps the hijackers off balance and at bay until rescue can eventually arrive.
And what I liked about the book, Cory, is that it was straightforward. There weren't any side tracks that you took through the book. And I was talking to a friend of mine at my regular job during the day, and he likes science fiction books too. He likes to read sci-fi. And I was describing your books to him, and he said, "Oh, that's the kind of book I like, because it's just wham bam, thank you ma'am, goes through the book. The hero wins at the end of the day, and you're done without all of these side tracks and everything else that's boring and all of that kind of stuff." And that's what I really like about your books. You just go right on in, tell the story, and you're done.
Well, thank you. Well, with a story like that, everybody has their own little story within the story, but something like that, considering everything that's happening, it needs to be straightforward. If you go off in too many directions, the story will start to bog down. And with something like that, which is basically about 200 pages of run and gun, you can't really divert in too many different directions.
Right. So boy, I just lost track of what I was going to say.
Oh, sorry.
That's amazing. Now, what was your influence for Galen? Let me see. How do you pronounce his last name? Galen Rojai.
Rojai.
Yeah, Rojai. How many are you planning on continuing the series with Galen in it? He's appeared in 2 books, folks. He was essentially sort of like a Jason Bourne with his memory in the taking of Sindriel's Hope, and in the second book he has actually become what do they call them? Space Rangers, Army Rangers.
The Ranger. Well, in Totentanz, there is actually a conversation that he has with another character where he tells the story of what led him to become a Ranger.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually wrote Totentanz first. And then I took that conversation and decided, let's expand upon that. So the taking of Sindriel's Hope is that expansion. It then tells the story 10 years prior of the events that led up to Galen's decision to eventually become a Ranger, a peacekeeper.
Right. So are you...
I wouldn't quite go so far as to call him Jason Bourne, because first of all, he's only a teenager in the taking of Sindriel's Hope, and he stumbles and falls a lot on his way to victory. But he refuses to give up, and he has that additional element over a lot of the other over most of the other characters in the story, because he has these psychic abilities, and he is from he's a Kyrian, which is a race of people who who have these psychic abilities. One among a number of races within that universe who have psychic abilities.
And his the society on his planet fell apart when he was a little kid, didn't it?
Yeah, there were, well, the society on the planet that he lived upon, that he and his parents had lived on, it was part of a colony experiment that went horribly wrong. And so after, when the colony just collapsed on itself, authorities came in, basically cleaned up the mess, took the survivors and repatriated them on their origin world. So he ended up going back to the world where his parents were born. He's adopted and becomes a member of Kyrian society again, grows up that way, and then moves on to basically to make good.
Yeah, and he's on his way to college for the first time, and he meets some other interesting characters on the ship. I won't give too much of it away. And then the hijackers take over the ship, and essentially he says, "I've had enough of this," and goes to try to stop the hijackers.
And again, makes a lot of, trips and falls a number of times along the way, but basically takes it upon himself because, like, so far as I can tell, I'm the only person on this ship who can do what I can do, and that being the case, I can't just sit here and do nothing.
Yeah. Now, the universe that you created for these characters, and I assume that the Hunter's Moon, I assume that takes place in the same universe, right?
Yes, it begins there, but unlike Totentanz and the Taking of Sindriel's Hope and another story that I'm in the process of getting out there called Darkspeed Arizani, the difference is the majority, the remaining half of the book takes place mostly on Earth.
Oh, okay. So Earth is a part of the universe, and it's not a totally fictional universe.
Yes, but as opposed to this, all of those other stories have nothing to do with Earth.
Right.
It's just by pure happenstance that some of my characters who start off there end up here.
Ah, okay. And I saw in Sindriel's Hope that there's people from, I would assume, from the colonies on Jupiter, Jovians you had in there?
No, actually, no. There's one character. Oh, she's Jovanan. That's a different world. Again,
okay.
that figure has nothing to do with our planet, our solar system, none of the planets that we know of. It is completely out somewhere else. Earth and anything that we know even remotely connected to Earth has nothing to do with this.
Okay.
Like the for example, the galaxy that Lucas had created for Star Wars has nothing to do with Earth. And yet he's created this whole rich tapestry of numerous different societies, human, humanoid, totally non-human, but has nothing to do with Earth, but still presents characters that we as humans can relate to.
Right. Well, I get it now. The cover art for the books, you do that yourself, don't you?
Yes.
And I kind of like that touch because so many of the books are these airbrushed works of art, and then when you open up your book, you're sadly disappointed. And your books, the cover art is exactly like the book. It's straight to the point, and not overly pretentious. And I like that about it.
Yeah, the thing with that is, and Wayne Barlow, who's the famous cover artist and conceptual artist, that was one of the points that he had made in one of his books, Barlow's Guide to Extraterrestrials, was that the unfortunate fact is that when a publisher contracts an artist to do the cover, all they give him or her is basically a synopsis. The artist is faced with a deadline, and they don't have time to read the book. So all they can do is create a cover based on the tiny scraps that's given to them by the publisher. So there are quite often times where the cover does not seem to accurately reflect the book, or say the aliens that are created for the cover look nothing like the aliens as described in the text.
Yeah, I think probably the only writer that doesn't appear to happen to is Larry Niven.
He's at a point where he can actually have an active hand in that whole process.
Right.
So he can actually sit and talk to the artists and basically hash out what they want what he had in mind, so what the cover should look like.
Right.
But that doesn't happen. That doesn't happen nearly as often as it should.
No,
just because of deadline pressures.
Yeah. Pardon me. That got me all choked up. I just got all emotional there for a second. I wanted to ask you: do you self-publish these, or do you have a publishing house that does it for you?
No, well, it's self-publishing. It's through an online publishing company called Lulu.com.
Lulu.com. Yes, I've heard of that. My wife is also an author, and she's been looking for a place to publish her memoirs, as it were.
The cool thing about Lulu is that it's basically your baby from start to finish, so you can format the pages exactly the way you want them to be seen.
Wow, that's pretty good. And do they have the I was on Amazon, and I was looking at your books on Amazon, and I see you don't have a Kindle version for it yet. Does when you're doing your self-publishing, have you considered bringing them out in a Kindle format?
Well, it's available in ebook format through Lulu.
Oh, okay.
Lulu itself is available in print to order and also the downloadable ebook format. And I was also relatively recently alerted by Lulu that the books are also available on downloadable ebook format in the ebook section of Apple iTunes.
Oh, okay. And how do we find your page on Lulu?
Just go to Lulu.com and then just bring up my name. You can bring up my name in the search, and it'll bring up all of the books.
Now, we are at Lulu right now, for those of you that are on the video site, and there they are. There are your books. We just did a search on Lulu, and there they are. And you do have the ebook. Cory sent me copies of his books, and I imported them into my Kindle to read them, so that you can read them probably in just about any reader. And there's Hunter's Moon.
They're in standard PDF format, which makes them just easy to download.
Yep. The ebook is $9.99.
Yeah.
Is that right? And then
yeah.
Now is the $29.99 version of your, or the $26.95 version of your books, is that hardcover or softcover?
It's soft cover. The thing with Lulu, I was only allowed to go but so far. Mm-hmm. Personally I wanted the price to be lower to make it more accessible, but I was only allowed to go but so low so that their company would make money off of the sale of the book as well as me. Personally, I would have taken a smaller slice of the pie if I could get more units sold. But they have a whole price structure formula based on the size of the book.
So it looks like they're, from what I see here on this page, it looks like they're more or less driving people towards the ebook version of it.
That may well be, although I know quite a few people who bought the hard copy, because the ebook format is great. You have all these different, you have the Kindle, the Nook, and what have you, and all these different tablets that you can read the media on. But still, nothing beats actually having the volume in your hand.
Yes, I have. You know what I did? I agree with you there. What I did is I took when I made the decision to start reading ebooks, because they're less expensive and they take up less paper, and that's a good thing. It leaves more money, more wood for actual lumber, so we can build stuff. But what I did was I took all my books and I packed them up in boxes and put them in the storage area, so that I wouldn't be tempted just to go over, on a Sunday afternoon, just go grab a book that I've read 100 times off the shelf, but actually go to Amazon or some other place and actually download a new book to read. And I find it's once you get used to it, I like the ebook a lot.
Oh, so do I.
Yeah, it's amazing because you got the dictionary there. You can look up the terms and do a Google search for what they're talking about. It's ebooks are great. If people in the audience haven't tried reading an ebook, you can actually get a lot of the ebook readers for your laptop.
Yeah, which I have for mine actually.
Yeah, you know what I do is I switch the orientation of the screen from landscape to portrait, and I just hold the laptop, sideways.
Oh, okay.
And it's like the size of a hardcover at that point, and it's really, I don't have any trouble reading it. It actually makes me pay more attention to what I'm reading. And if you can imagine that, you gotta. I think your mental acuity requires you to be more involved in what you're reading rather than just skimming over the pages and flipping the paper, because we're so genetically attuned to doing that now. Having a new way to do it makes you actually pay attention more to what you're reading, I think.
Yeah, you gotta. We live in an era where everything moves that much faster, and unfortunately, as a result of that, people have developed diminished attention spans.
Yeah, and it helps you slow down.
And actually, one of the things that I like, for my taste as far as movies goes, I like movies that you can. I like some movies that you don't have to use a great deal of intellectual energy. You can just coast along with it and have fun. But I also like movies that require an attention span, films that require that you pay attention to everything that's happening, because everything leads to something else.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, it's like where everything leads to something else, and if you weren't paying attention earlier, then something later in the story is like, wait a minute. Or if you may have thought you missed it, but subconsciously you picked it up, then later on you're like, wait a minute, didn't this happen here? Okay, that's why that happened there.
Yeah. There's I saw a movie over the weekend, this past weekend, that I had never seen before. It came out in 2009. It's called The International.
Yes.
And it is. I watched that movie and I'm going, there is so many great quotes in this movie. I'm watching this movie and I'm going, I got to write that down for the show.
Clive Owen and Naomi Watts, yeah.
Yeah, it is so. That movie is so involved, and it's based on actual events. As a matter of fact, the banking crisis in the mid '80s in the UK, the movie is essentially loosely based on that. And the greatest line that I saw in that movie that I like so much is, and I forget who said it, that the true value of a conflict is the debt that it creates. And I thought to myself, yeah, that explains an awful lot.
Yeah.
That explains what's going on this planet these days.
Like wherever there's war, someone's profiting from it.
Yep, somebody's making money somehow. But getting, we seem to keep jumping around, but getting back to your acting career. Actually, we haven't even touched on your acting career yet, and I wanted to do that because you seem to have such a well-rounded acting career. You've been in films, Day of Atonement, Fighting Words, Red Herring, Reflections Ago, The Sea Shift. You've done videos. You're involved in doing some medical training videos, aren't you?
Well, not so much medical training videos. No, my job involves hands-on training of medical students who are preparing for their internship and residency.
Mm.
And because of the nature of the job, I can't really say much more about it without violating our company's confidentiality agreement.
It's a super secret thing.
Well, if too much leaks out, it'll compromise the job. But what I can say is if anybody has seen the episode of Seinfeld where Kramer plays a patient,
I'm sorry.
that's about as close as I can get.
I'm sorry, that's one of the funniest episodes. where they're fighting over the candy and it winds up in the...
Not quite that wacky, but that's about as close as I can get.
that was funny. Now, you also appear in Mostly True Stories, don't you?
Yeah, that was a few years ago, but they keep popping up on the Learning Channel, because every once in a while I'll run into someone who says, I saw you once. I'm like, what? We did that how long ago? Basically, what Mostly True Stories is shows about urban legends, where they have reenactments of famous urban legends, and then presents evidence to either confirm or debunk said urban legends. One of them was, and this actually took place in Pennsylvania in the 70s, where the cops had caught this guy who was part of a robbery ring. And the guy, he wasn't going to give up his buddies, I'll give him that much, but he definitely wasn't the brightest crayon in the box. And they're trying to pump him for information, but he's not budging. So the cops get the idea, since they don't have a polygraph machine on hand, what they do is strap the guy down to a chair, put a colander on his head, and have the colander wired to a photocopier. And there's a piece of paper on the photocopier that says he's lying. And they just interrogate the guy, and every time he gives an answer that they don't like, they hit the button, and it just prints out he's lying over and over again until the guy finally cracks under the strain and gives them the information that they want.
So I got to know, is that an urban legend or is that real?
This apparently actually happened. This I believe, happened in New Hope, Pennsylvania back in the early 1970s.
So that was basically your old stomping grounds, where they put colanders on people's heads and use copiers for lie detectors.
And I played one of the cops who was interrogating this guy. And when I found out that had actually happened, I was hysterical. So I did one of those. I've done a number of them. There was one where I had a next door neighbor who had a rabbit, and my dog kept getting into her yard. And so she's complaining to me about my dog getting into her yard, and then one day the dog comes back and he's got a rabbit in its mouth.
Oh my goodness.
And so I freak, and I'm cleaning the rabbit. I clean the rabbit off and then put it back in its hut, go back to my neighbor's yard and put the rabbit back in its hutch. And wait to see what happens. The woman comes home, finds the rabbit dead in the hutch, and freaks out. The reason being the rabbit had actually died several days earlier, and she buried it in her backyard, and the dog dug it up.
Oh. I don't care who you are. That's funny right there.
Well, that was one of a number of. They did a whole wide assortment of various different stories, urban legends. At least half of them happened to be true. That's the weird thing. Half of them happen to be true.
Did you do the guy on the lawn chair with the helium balloons?
Oh God, I remember that story, and that ended up being one of the plot points in the movie. If you've ever seen the movie Danny Deckchair.
No, I haven't seen that movie.
It's a British film about a guy who he gets tired of the life that he's living, and basically he gets a whole bunch of helium balloons, ties into a deck chair, and floats off for parts unknown. And then the chair eventually crashes. He ends up in this little village somewhere, like so far removed from his previous life that he's like, okay, this is great. I don't have the kind of pressures I had to deal with before. Nobody knows who I am. I can make a life for myself. But then little by little, his old life starts to intrude on that. And it's a British film. It's actually a pretty funny movie. It's called Danny Deckchair.
Danny Deckchair. I gotta write that down. I gotta see if I can rent that from Amazon. That actually sounds pretty good. Why did you go into acting? I mean, your mother was an English teacher, and your grandmother was an editor and a minister. So why did you go right into the den of iniquity out there in Hollywood and decide to become an actor?
Well, again, my mother said that the warning signs of the budding performer had been there from a very early age. And being an only child, I had a lot of time to myself, not only reading, but creating realities in my head that I would then act out.
So you were basically essentially just about the same thing that Limbaugh did, because he just got himself a little radio and a tape player and started pretending he was a radio host when he was a tiny little kid. So you essentially did sort of the same thing.
I wrote stuff for myself. I wrote stuff that I would get other neighborhood kids to participate in, and I was not the most popular kid in my neighborhood, so that ended up being a way for me to connect with some of the other kids in the neighborhood. Because, I mean, whereas a lot of the other kids were into sports, I really wasn't.
Right.
I was the shy, bookish nerd. But that was a way to be able to connect with some of the other kids, with me creating stuff and then getting other kids involved in it. And then, as a matter of fact, I remember the first play that I ever did was in 5th grade. It was How the Indians Got Corn. I still remember the only line, and I played a young Indian brave. I made my own costume. I had one line in the entire play: "In darkness we are blind. We cannot see at night like the wildcat." Why I remember that all the way going back to 5th grade, I don't know, but that basically started me on that path. When I went to Kappa, I was more focused on writing, but acting and writing, the two go hand in hand because it's all about storytelling.
Right.
Whether you're using your body, whether you're actually putting it on paper or using your voice and your body to tell the story, it's all about storytelling. So that again, it all came together. And then when I went off to college, I was looking for something to do on campus. Mm-hmm. And I found out that there was a play being cast in one of the dorms that was still missing one last part. And it happened to be the play The Night Thoreau Spent in Jail. And they were casting the part of an escaped slave named Henry Williams. I went out for it, I got it, and doing the play, being on stage, getting immediate feedback from the audience, drawing all of that energy, that is what made me decide that I was going to go into that line. That's what made me choose drama as my major. And from then on, I continued to write. I definitely continued to write. But from then on, the drive was toward acting.
Have you ever written anything that you've performed?
I've written things that I've tried to get out there. I've co-written things that in school that I got a chance to perform in, and I've actually, one of the scripts that I'm shopping around now, and we have investors who are interested.
Wow.
It's actually the script, the screenplay adaptation of The Taking of Sindriel's Hope.
Oh, that would actually be a pretty darn good movie.
And I have myself in mind playing the villain of the story. So, and the funny thing is, the title, since piracy, at the time that it had been written, piracy was really big in the news, and to some degree still is. Mm-hmm. But the title itself was kind of a lift from the movie The Taking of Pelham 123.
You know, I thought the same thing when I first started reading the book, because I wasn't sure what it was about. I thought it was like it was going to turn out to be a science fiction love story or something. And then once they actually got onto the ship, I said to myself, this is so much like Pelham 123.
And I'm talking the original 1974 film with Walter Matthau and Robert Shaw.
So am I. I haven't seen any later versions of it.
There was one version that was made for television back during the late 90s with Edward James Olmos and Lorraine Bracco. And then there was the big budget film that later came out with Denzel Washington and John Travolta. But I still remember the original film, and that's where I kind of lifted that and made my own title out of it.
Let me ask you a question. Talking about the earlier movies and films and what they're doing today. I saw, what did I see? I saw it was an adaptation of a stage play. They actually took it right from Broadway and put it in a television studio and did it live. And it starred Sidney Poitier, and I forget who else. But I sat down, the wife and I sat down, and we started watching it, and it was like we couldn't turn it off because it was the acting was so poignant and beautiful, so much better than what you see in the movies today. Do you agree or disagree, or am I missing something with the new style of acting or something?
Well, that's hard to. When the business was young, and they first started, there wasn't an actual particular style for acting on camera, so everything was still done the way it was done on stage. Later, as films gained popularity and became more technically sophisticated, they had to develop a whole different style for acting than what you would see on stage, and even that had to change for television, because with film, you can cut and recut, you can stop and start all over again. Mm-hmm. The early days of television, you didn't have that luxury.
Yeah, like the ones that I think of are the original Twilight Zones.
The original Twilight Zones, Playhouse, the old show Playhouse 90.
Yep.
Even Sid Caesar's show, for example. This is going back beyond me, but I've seen reruns.
Yeah.
Going back there, if you made a mistake, you had no choice but just keep going.
Carol Burnett. The Carol Burnett show, that was live, too.
Yes.
That was.
And so you end up, I mean, you have to hone your craft. You have to be that much better and stay on top of the material that much more, because it's stage acting, but it's in front of the camera, so you have to split the difference between being nuanced enough for close-ups, but being big enough for the audience, and to do your best not to flub your lines. So there's a whole process involved with that. There's a lot more going on in the mind of the actor than most people realize. It's not just reading lines.
And I imagine it's pretty hectic for the stage crew too.
Oh, because them having to stay with television back then, them having to stay on top of everything, because things can change so rapidly. Whereas with film, you can cut, start again, that type of thing. Again, back during those days in television, you didn't have that kind of luxury. There's a film out now. I believe it's called The Sunset Limited. It was made for cable. It was running on HBO. It's a black box drama. It's two men in a room, but it's Samuel L. Jackson and Tommy Lee Jones. It's just two men in a room. One guy saves another from committing suicide. The guy who tries to commit suicide is an atheist, is a college professor and an atheist. The guy who saves him is a believer in God. He's an ex-con and has a much lower level job and lower level of education. But watching the two of them, it's just these two men in a room having a conversation that sometimes actually becomes a battle of will and ideologies. But it's a fascinating thing to watch, and to see two actors like Samuel L. Jackson and Tommy Lee Jones doing this together. It's just an amazing thing to see.
I have to see that. That does remind me a lot of the old days of television when everything was live. Does anybody still do that that type of filmmaking or television art, or is that just relegated to the internet now?
Well, this movie was made for HBO, so you have that. You don't see very many black box dramas anymore, mainly because people like to see a lot going on.
Right.
But you will see scenes within larger films that become black box dramas, because it then becomes about two or three people, them relating to each other and the circumstances around them, and then it expands into the much larger canvas of the film, so it can go in and out and in and out and in and out, which is a good thing when it can do that. There was another thing that you might like to see. It was also on cable. I believe it was on HBO. It was Lawrence Fishburne. The show was called Thurgood. 2 hours. Lawrence Fishburne doing a one-man show on the life and career of Thurgood Marshall.
Wow.
That was absolutely incredible.
That was also on. Was it television or was it a cinema release?
It was on cable, but it was a televised theatrical production.
Yeah, I always sort of wish that somebody would get back to doing that again, doing the teleplays is what they call them.
Yeah, that type of thing for film, that ends up working for like the smaller independent films, mainly because they don't have the kind of budgets that big films have. So let's see what we can do with what we have. Let's see how creative and riveting we can be with what we have to work with. So that type of thing, again, the black box dramas tend to work better with smaller independent projects. where you have the much larger films, there are so many more people involved. There's so much more, if it's well written, there's so much more story involved. And there's so much more going on that you don't always have the kind of intimacy that you would for something like that. With the film The King's Speech, it really became more or less about the king and his speech therapist. It was the King of England who had a speech impediment,
Right.
and a speech therapist who was brought in to work with him, and even with all the other people who were involved in their lives, it really became about the two of them, their friendship, and how this director, and he's helped me with a lot of writing process for my work. One of the things that he always has told me, especially when it comes to script writing, is don't write down to the audience, don't dumb it down, but geek it down enough to make it accessible to a wider audience. Not just your sole niche audience. If you want to appeal to a wider audience, you do have to geek it down to some degree. And that can be difficult for me at times because I write the way I think, and sometimes I think in nerd speak. I'm not quite as bad as say, Sheldon from Big Bang Theory, but I do. That's why I have Rick to get on me about that. So I can at least bring it down to the point where there's enough of it. There's enough of the elements that keep your hardcore science fiction readers or hardcore science fiction viewers involved, but it can still appeal to a wider audience.
Right.
Well, writing is more challenging in as much as, again, the editing and then the marketing once the finished product is done.
So
like, if you think writing a book is difficult, marketing that book is like herding cats.
oh, it's horrible. And unless it's something that sells itself, but that's once in a lifetime.
Yeah, I mean,
unless you're a big name author like Niven or Heinlein.
and how many Christopher Paulinis actually come about? The guy who wrote Aragon and that whole series.
Right.
He started that when he was 16. He wrote Aragon. He wrote Aragon when he was 16. The kid is a certifiable genius.
Yeah.
But I mean, how often does that happen? And got published, I won't say right away, but pretty quickly. And that doesn't happen very often. The advent of self-publication with sites like Lulu and what have you, they are enormously advantageous in as much as they help you get your material made.
Right.
But then it's more incumbent upon the writer to be really judicious about his editing, to put yourself in a position where you can hire an editor who can come at it from a different point of view, and you're going to butt heads, but so you can reach some kind of compromise to get it out there. And then, God, it's still incumbent upon you as a writer to do your own marketing if you're not in a financial position to be able to hire a publicist.
Right.
Marketing consultants. You still have to do that yourself. You have to do your own research. That's why radio shows like this, online social networking, they are a big help.
Well, I'm glad we can help out any way that we can.
Thank you.
Yeah, the folks that are on the video side probably noticed that the streaming encoder that's recording the show, by the way, crashed a few minutes ago.
Ouch.
So part of our conversation was, let's see, was about 5 minutes worth. Wasn't recorded, but that's okay. We will. We weren't talking about anything particularly important at that point, I don't think. So, but we appreciate you coming on the show. I mean, this has been for me, it's been an utterly fascinating conversation.
Oh, thank you.
And you know, I mean, this is one of those shows when I first started out, I was like, well, what the heck am I going to talk to a guy about? Okay, he wrote a book, and he was on TV, and that's about it. This is going to last 5 minutes. And here we are now, almost 2 hours later, and this is Cory. This has been a fascinating conversation. You've got a lot of depth for I want to say, I don't take it the wrong way, I mean, when people think of the Hollywood people, they think of them saying dumb things constantly.
Mm.
And you've got a lot of depth. You're a very serious actor.
I'm trying, and it's still an uphill climb. I've reached a point in my career where I'm still always looking for work. It's always about looking for work. If I can have a immediate modicum of success as a character actor, but still suffer from what they call that guy syndrome.
Right.
You see the person, you'll recognize them, you've seen them in a bunch of stuff, but their name eludes you. It's right at the tip of your tongue, but it's not quite there. That's fine. I really don't have as much of a problem with that as I would have earlier on, because regardless of that, it's still about the work. It's always about the work. There was one time when, I believe it was Jay Leno was interviewing Denzel Washington a few years ago, and it was about a film, I think it was when Training Day came out, and then he asked him, so what are you doing now? It's like, looking for work. And then Jay just looked and it's like, you pulled down $10 million a picture. And then a lot of people don't get it. It's like, the money is good when you can get it, but it's not about that. The money helps you live more comfortably and do a lot of the things that you want to do a lot of things that you need to do, and then do a lot of things that you want to do. But regardless, it's always about the work. From the highest salary to the lowest, you're always still looking for work, looking to keep your name out there. You don't necessarily want to flood the market, but keep your name out there, keep your face out there, and keep working on yourself, working on your craft, improving yourself.
Right.
It's always about the work.
And how does an actor go about picking a script?
Well,
because I always think of like Gene Hackman. I mean, the guy always seems to get the perfect script. And these other guys, that they're all going around, they're these A-list actors, and they keep starring in flubs, in like these horrible movies. And Gene Hackman, every single time, it seems to be a really good movie.
Some people have it like that, and some people have an amazing eye for a script. Gene Hackman is also at a position where he could pick and choose.
Right.
When you're starting off, even when you're where I am, you don't always have, you have the luxury to pick and choose, but if you choose not to do a project, you end up not working and therefore not making any money.
Right.
But when you're at a position where you can pick and choose, some people just have an eye for a great script, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Gene Hackman was actually originally up for the role of Hannibal Lecter in Silence of the Lambs.
Oh, that would not have worked.
he had originally optioned. He had gotten a hold of the Thomas Harris novel and had originally optioned the script. But for for all kinds of political reasons that were involved at the time, he eventually had to bow out. And by that time, they'd hired a director. Jodie Foster was on board, Jonathan Demme was on board, but for a number of reasons, Gene Hackman wasn't able to do it. And so then they went with Anthony Hopkins, which, I mean, the rest is history as far as that goes. But at the time, people were really unsure as to how that was going to turn out. Not as many Americans knew much about Anthony Hopkins at that time. Although Jodie Foster was a child actor and had been in the business for a long time, she stepped away from it to go to school and had to pretty much start over when she came back. And Jonathan Demme was known for comedies. So that was a whole interesting pair-up. But, yeah, Gene Hackman was originally up for Hannibal Lecter, and because he had an eye for a good script. And there are a lot of actors, they have an eye for a really good script, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes they get involved with something that they think is going to be fun to do, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And then there are times when it's simply mercenary.
Yeah. That's interesting. You know, I always kind of figured he either had a really, really good publicist or he had a good eye for picking a script.
And of just also knowing people. I mean, he's so well connected. I mean, his agent, his publicist, and just knowing people, and people will come to him. It's like, I have this great script that I want you to look at. And sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. Another perfect case of that was when Clint Eastwood did Gran Torino.
Yeah.
Someone he knew the guy who wrote the script. Presented the script to him, he read it, and said, okay, let's do this. With little or no editorial changes in the script.
Wow.
That almost never happens.
That is very unusual.
That almost never happens. Oh, here's a really funny pitch for you, though. Do you remember the movie Chicken Run?
Yeah.
It was a fun animated thing, and Mel Gibson was the voice of the hero Chicken in this.
Right.
The guys from Aardvark Landheim, who had actually made quite a name for themselves doing the Wallace and Gromit shorts, they had a dinner meeting with Steven Spielberg, and they pitched him the movie Chicken Run like this: it's the Great Escape with chickens. Little did they know that Steven Spielberg raises chickens on his ranch, and his favorite movie is The Great Escape.
Wow, that's quite a coincidence.
And Spielberg said, "I'm in. Let's do it. Done deal."
That's a great story. That's a great inside Hollywood story.
But again, how often does something like that happen? That's crazy.
Not very often. I mean, it's
But you love to hear it.
yeah, it's like divine providence kind of a thing.
It's like we were brought together for a reason.
Yep, that's so true. I mean, that's very true. Yeah, we have. Well, actually, we've gone a little bit over time that we had scheduled for tonight.
Okay.
Where we've been on for an hour and a half, including one crash of the one of the broadcasting servers crashed. One of the recorders went down. So I've got some editing to do tonight, but the phone worked.
Yeah, we've been on together the whole time, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, we've had so much trouble with this phone system, folks. You know, anybody who's watched this show and listened to it more than once knows that the phones are constantly going out. We have a lot of controversial guests on, and the phone, the voice over IP stuff gets hacked, it gets shut down, they inject noises and stuff into it, and now we've gone to a landline system, and this works great.
Yeah, it's been wonderful. Like I said, we've been able to stay on the entire time.
Yeah, that's a first for this show. I'm quite happy. There's another first for your career.
Hey, nothing like it.
Yeah. Listen, Cory, I really appreciate you coming on. This has been a lot of fun for me.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. This is I just can't tell you how much I enjoyed this this conversation doing this particular episode of Surrounded by Idiots. I mean, this is great.
I've had a ball, man.
Yeah, it sounds like it. We've talked about just about everything. So I really appreciate you coming on. This will be up on our YouTube channel, Sun Sky Mysteries, very shortly, as soon as I can splice all of the different recordings together to make something that makes sense. And that'll be up, and I'll send you an email link when it's up, so you can tell all your friends you appeared with some crazy white guy wearing sunglasses on a show.
Oh, thank you.
With a shaved head, no less.
I did that once.
Did you?
Found out I could get away with it, so.
Yeah, it's. I mean, this has been great. I've really enjoyed it. I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed it. It's been.
Well, bye. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you for coming on. We really appreciate it, and we will be in touch in the near future.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, was Cory Williams, the world-famous Hollywood actor. And he will be in a web series. We'll put a link up at our website for that. And once the web series gets active, we'll maybe have him on again if he's willing. And that's about it for tonight. Thank you for showing up. We really appreciate it. And the recording of this will be up as soon as we can make heads or tails of the recordings that we have gotten. Thank you for showing up. And those of you on the audio side, the Windows Media stream is starting back up now. And those of you on the audio, on the video side, thank you for showing up. We really appreciate it. And this will be on YouTube in the near future. Good night.